I was out of work and looking for something to pay the rent until I could find a new job that was in my field when I saw the ad. I'd been scrolling through the job listings when it caught my eye. Several positions open at the Good Shade Hotel. $40 plus per hour. Well, damn, that was way more than a decent paycheck to work in a hotel. I was shocked that they'd even have positions if they're paying that much, but it seemed to be my lucky day. I mean, sure, I lived in a huge city, but it was odd that I'd never heard of the place when it obviously was making a lot of money. I figured it must be extremely classy and high maintenance, and I was prepared to put up with some rich jerks if it meant a sweet paycheck. There was no address or phone number, just an email. I shot out a reply containing my resume and kept looking through the other offers on the site. Before I found anything else that might be worth applying for, my inbox pinged. The people at the Good Shade were quick in their response. Dear Mr. Stevens, it has come to our attention that you would like to apply for a position at the Good Shade Hotel. Your resume has been taken into account, and we require you to answer several follow-up questions so that you may be considered for the job. Then came a series of questions. Some were normal and others were extremely odd. I thought maybe they were trying to rule out anyone who might be crazy. No one wants psychotic hotel staff after all, right? Have you had prior experience working in customer service and/or hospitality? Yes, both. Prior experience in a small motel. Would you be comfortable filling out an NDA form? Yes. Would you be comfortable working in a remote location? Yes. Are you willing/able to drive long distances to attend work? Yes. Are you willing/able to work night shifts? Yes. Which type of position are you looking for? Any available, preferably not housekeeping, but willing if need be. Have you had any issues with mental illness? No. Do you take any medications? If yes, please list. No. Do you believe in paranormal/supernatural/extraterrestrial beings? Not really, there's no proof of them. Unsure of my beliefs in the afterlife. How many people live in your household? Only myself. What is your marital/relationship status? Single, never married. Have you ever heard of our hotel? Only in the job listing I responded to. Do you contain 100% human genetics? As far as I know, yes. What caused you to apply for work here? I am unemployed, have experience in this type of work, and could honestly use the money. Please list any questions or concerns below your responses. We will respond to your application promptly. An affirmative response to your application will come with an email containing the details of your job placement and a few documents requiring signature. Thank you for applying at the Good Shade Hotel. A. Smith, owner and manager. Like I said, some super odd questions. I wasn't about to turn it down though, I needed the money. I didn't think much of the odd questions anyways. The only logical explanation was that they had a bad experience with a psycho employee or two. If I was paying that much to employ someone, you're damn sure I'd want to make sure that they didn't think they were E.T. I answered every question as truthfully as possible and sent the email back, confident that I'd be getting the job. My confidence was not misplaced. I received the affirmative response within the hour. I was overjoyed. This job paid so well that I'd never want to look for a different one. The new email gave me an address that I was to be at exactly 4 p.m. the next day. I would be working as a receptionist, $40 an hour to answer phones, put reservations into computers, and give out room keys. It would be simple. Maybe not the most stimulating work, but tolerable. The drive out to the address I was given was odd. I passed through a tunnel I had been through a few times before, but I could swear that I didn't recognize the area I was in after coming out of that tunnel. I pushed my confusion aside, figuring that the landscape had changed since my last time in the area. I arrived at the address after over an hour of driving. It was remote and surrounded by forest. The building itself was grand, 15 stories high and beautiful architecture. The trees surrounding the hotel were probably the tallest I'd seen in my life. They seemed to scrape the sky. Somehow, the hotel managed to look perfectly normal amidst the beautiful natural environment that stretched far into the distance. It was the only building for miles around, and it was well hidden. It occurred to me that the guests likely paid very well for this sort of seclusion. It was deeply peaceful. When I entered the building, I found it to be dark and elegant. The place was so classy that the paycheck suddenly seemed reasonable. It wasn't the biggest hotel, but it was probably the fanciest one I'd set foot inside in my entire life. The lobby seemed cavernous, and my steps seemed to echo as I walked up to the front desk. Behind the desk stood a pretty redhead. She smiled as I came forward. "How can I help you, sir?" she asked politely in a sweet sing-song voice. I'm here for the receptionist position." I shook myself mentally. I had been staring. She giggled at my flustered state. "I'll let Mr. Smith know you've arrived." I resumed my staring as she walked away. There was something different about that girl. She returned with a tall man in tow. We shook hands and introduced ourselves, but I found myself distracted by the smiling redhead. Mr. Smith seemed to notice my waning attention. He led me behind the desk and into an office. "Quite the nuisance that Althea is," he chuckled fondly. "Althea?" I questioned. The unusual name felt odd on my tongue. Yes. I believe she's calling herself Alice now. Kind creature, when she wants to be. She's here from time to time to help out. You shouldn't experience any negative side effects," he replied, seemingly lost in thought. I had no idea what he meant, but I assumed he meant the immediate attraction I felt for her. She must have a history of fellow employees lusting after her. "Ready for your entry meeting?" he asked abruptly, apparently back on track. I nodded, and the meeting that followed left me confused and, to be entirely honest, a little freaked out. He went over the questions from my application, we discussed them in slightly more detail, and he provided more information about the job and its requirements. I had to sign a form before we even began talking about the position. Fortunately, a loophole I found in the contracts does not disallow me from posting my entire experience in a place that most of the world thinks is for fictional tales. I know that this place holds the truth. You know it too. This is the one place where I can freely talk about my experience, and I'm so thankful to be able to get it all off my chest. Anyways, the rest of the meeting brought to light some of the reasons why I may not be allowed to speak of the job or the guests, but it initially made me wonder if perhaps my boss was insane. 100% human genetics, he questioned as he looked over my application. Very good. The guests have been missing having someone of your appeal. Then he began listing the details of the position. I would mainly be working at the front desk. There may be occasional instances when I am requested by a guest to deliver items to their room. They may also request to look at me for a maximum of 5 minutes, with 0 physical contact. I am to avoid any physical contact, including accidentally brushing against the clients. The contract requires 3 months minimum attendance before I may opt out, and opting out comes with what he called a mandatory deconditioning. Opportunities to opt out and be debriefed are provided at 3-month intervals. Attempting to quit before one of the intervals breaks the rules of the contract. He listed off the consequences of breaking the contract at such a speed that I barely understood them, and he followed up by saying, "I think you'll do wonderfully here, Mr. Stevens." I was kind of dazed from all the information, but I signed the contract. My boss might be a little crazy and the requirements might be slightly odd, but the money wasn't something that I could pass up. How bad could it be? My first shift was that very evening. I'd be working the desk alongside Alice. Mr. Smith came up to the desk as I adjusted the name tag he had given me, Tyler Stevens, HS. Alice, he sighed. Be nice to this young man. It's hard to find people like him. She pouted for a moment, then nodded. Smith shifted his gaze to me and held out his hand. It contained a small vial of milky liquid. If you start to become delusional, a drop in each eye. He turned and walked away. I looked to Alice in confusion. It's in your contract, she said. That'll kill any negative side effects if you happen to touch the wrong guest, or spend too much time with me. She gave a wide smile, and for a moment her teeth looked unnaturally sharp. I slipped the vial into my pocket, feeling incredibly skeptical about the entire job. It was too late to back out now, though. I had already signed the contract. The beginning of the shift was slow. No guests had come to check in or out. I found myself staring at Alice again. Her name tag caught my eye. Althea, I.C. No last name? I asked. She glanced at her name tag. Don't have one. At least not one that would fit or make sense on a name tag, she shrugged. And the letters? H.S. I.C. Homo sapien, Illechabrosa Cur. Scientific name in your case. The shades decided mine, she said nonchalantly, typing something into the computer. Illechabrosa Cur? Shades? What? I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke on the newbie. Charming mutt, she said dryly. Their sense of humor is immaculate. It doesn't pay to be one of a kind. I stared for a moment, looking for a hint that she was joking. Her face remained completely serious. Oh, I responded, not sure what to say. She started laughing out of nowhere, and I was relieved for a moment. You really have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, huh? I'm a really overpaid receptionist? And I'm the victim of the weirdest hazing ever? I said, with a nervous laugh. She giggled again. I could tell you, but I think it'd be more fun to watch you gradually realize what you're a part of. She paused, looking around the empty lobby. I'll tell you this though, the name has a reason. All of our guests are shades of some sort. I'm one as well. In fact, you'll probably be the only person roaming around wearing an HS for the entirety of your employment. I have no idea what a shade is, I told her. Her response was a wide smile, revealing rows of shark-like teeth. I took a step back, letting out another nervous laugh. I was afraid. They're real. Want a touch? She asked. The amusement on her face was plain to see. I shook my head no, unable to respond. She shrugged and turned back to the computer. I wasn't sure what to think, but I was now wholeheartedly aware that this girl was not human. The room fell silent. I had no idea how to start a conversation after seeing that. Alice's voice broke the tension. Sylvia should be here in exactly 2 minutes. I nodded, still not trusting myself to say something that wouldn't have me eaten by those teeth. She was right though. I watched the clock on the far wall tick the time away. Exactly 120 ticks later, the front door opened. A girl who had to be no older than 12 entered. She was a horrifying mess, covered in dirt and blood. Her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, and a bone was protruding grotesquely from her forearm. She dragged her right leg behind her, the ankle quite obviously broken, and a deep gash in her forehead was pouring blood. My first instinct was to scream, and my second was to run to help. Alice yelled for me to stop, but I ignored her. I ran to the young girl. Oh my god, are you okay? Do you need me to call you an ambulance? What happened? The words erupted from my mouth, hardly a space for breath between them. She stared blankly into the distance, not acknowledging my panicked questions. I reached out for her, and Alice yelled out from near the desk, "Stop!" Too late. I gripped the girl's shoulders and stared at her. Her eyes were glazed over with a milky white, and she let out a piercing scream when my hands made contact. Before I could blink, she was gone. My hands were grasping at empty air. She had simply and entirely disappeared from the lobby. "You moron!" Alice yelled at me again. I stared at her, nowhere near understanding what had just occurred. She sighed as she saw my face. "Now she's going to loop. She'll be back in an hour." "What?" "You're not supposed to touch the guests," she stated, sounding annoyed. "We need to call the police. She was seriously hurt." I was freaking out. "She was seriously dead," she said dryly. "The phones here don't make calls to 911 anyways. She's a shade, stop panicking. You'll get used to it." I couldn't think of any response to that. I still hadn't fully grasped what this job was all about. I suddenly realized that I had no feeling in my hands. I clutched them close to my chest to discover that they were as cold as ice. Instantly, the feeling spread deep into my chest and up my arms. I was freezing and began shivering violently as I walked back to the desk. Alice glanced at me when I arrived beside her and let out another exasperated sigh. "Give me the vial, tip your head back," she ordered. I pulled it out of my pocket while she took an eyedropper from a drawer in the desk. I watched as she squeezed the end of the dropper to pull liquid from the vial. The milky substance turned a pale purple as it entered the dropper. I leaned my head back and allowed her to put a drop in each of my eyes. As she tucked the vial back into my pocket and put away the dripper, I felt the cold leave my body. "When Sylvia gets back, I'll deal with her," she said calmly. "Maybe you should just watch for the first couple of days. There's a lot to learn about the different types of shades that we room." I nodded and sat patiently. I looked over the fine print in my contract while we waited. Early dismissal from any staff position will result in an extremely painful deconditioning process. It is highly recommended to wait the entire 3-month period so that we may provide a nearly painless process. Based on what I had seen tonight, I didn't want to know what these people considered a painful process. I'd stick out the job for 3 months and quit if I couldn't handle the insanity. Soon enough, Sylvia came back. She looked exactly the same as she had an hour ago. I resisted the urge to both scream and vomit. Alice called out to her. "Hi, Sylvia, sweetie." She walked over and knelt in front of the mangled girl. "Welcome back to the good shade. I'm sorry to tell you again, but you're dead." Sylvia's head snapped toward Alice at an inhuman speed. She nodded, seeming to think for a moment. "We have room U344 available for you," Alice told her, holding out a keycard. The girl nodded again, took the key, and shuffled her way towards the elevator. When the doors shut behind her, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Alice walked back over and sat at the desk. "There's no one else scheduled for tonight. You could probably nap until the shift ends." "Yeah, I might," I started. Then curiosity got the best of me. U344? "Oh, Mr. Smith forgot to tell you? Well, we have 50 floors of underground rooms," she told me. "A lot of the guests prefer it." I don't know why it surprised me after everything else that had happened. I was sitting next to a girl with shark teeth, and we had just let a mangled corpse into the hotel. What else? I don't know how I'm going to manage the next 3 months without having nightmares. I laughed, but the statement was entirely serious. "Oh, honey," Alice giggled. "You'll see much worse, trust me." I stared at her sharp teeth and felt a chill run through me. She wasn't wrong about that.